Sorry, folks. Having a little problem with the ear mic. Can you hear me okay? Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here. You already know that you're in for a real musical treat this morning. I want to thank Caden Bloomer, our oboist, for our service today. It's been wonderful, Caden, to have you here previously with the Woodwind Trio, and now to get to hear your solo repertoire. That Poulenc piece is just the first movement of a beautiful sonata that I think is one of the most loveliest things written for the oboe and the piano. So we've got more for you in store today. I hope you'll enjoy, and thank you, Caden. And thank you, Kristen, for being our liturgist this morning. And thank you, Edie, and I think Lamont probably gets dragged into helping too, for having refreshments for us this morning next door in Fellowship Hall. Hope that you'll all join us for some good food and good conversation after the service. At this point, I invite all who are able to stand and join responsively in the call to worship printed in the bulletin.
In a world torn by violence and pain, a world far from wholeness and peace,
Give us the courage to say, Adonai, there is one God in heaven and earth. The high heavens declare your glory.
May earth reveal your justice and love. From bondage in Egypt, we were delivered.
At Sinai, we bound ourselves to your way. Inspired by prophets and sages, time and again, we overcame oppressive forces.
Though our failings are many and our faults are great, it has been our glory to bear witness to the light of love, keeping alive in troubled times a vision of a world redeemed. Let us continue to work for the day when the nations will be one and at peace.
Then shall we rejoice as Israel did, singing on the shore of the sea. Let us join together in singing the first 3 verses of our bulletin insert, In the Midst of New Dimensions.
Starving people, warring factions and despair, who will lift the olive branches, who will light the flame of care. God of rainbow, fiery pillar, leading where the eagles soar, we your people, journey now and ever, now and ever, now and evermore. As we stand a world divided by our own self-seeking schemes, grant that we, your global village, might envision wider dreams. God of rainbow,
At this time, I invite us all into a few moments of silent meditation and prayer. This is a time to center our hearts, our minds, our bodies, and our spirits into this time and place that we are sharing together today. After a few moments of silent meditation have gone by, we'll be brought back into the flow of our liturgy with a musical meditation. Let us join together now in silent meditation. Our scripture reading this morning is from the book of Exodus. Like so much of the Bible, this book has many layers within it, written at different times from various authors. And there's some odd things about this reading. For example, there's the messenger of God that is moving from the front of the Israelites to the back. A messenger that is moving from the role of guiding and then the role of protecting. And this portion of the story talks about the cloud being there with the Israelites in the darkness. And that the cloud in the darkness lit up the night. And it gets called a pillar of fire and cloud. It's just very interesting, because earlier in the story, there is the pillar of fire at night and the pillar of cloud by day. It seems like here, as things are coming to a climax, they're coming together in one thing. This cloud was both cloud and flame, separating the Israelites from the Egyptian army. And these elements of the story remind us not to take everything here on purely a literal, historical level. This is about a people who had been enslaved, oppressed, and exploited for generations, finding as they escaped guidance and protection on their journey. And water features prominently in the Exodus story, not only in the portion we're going to hear today. We'll say more about that later. But for now, let's listen to this as a story with a message, actually with many messages. The incredible miracles that it recounts would have been understood by the original audience to be a sign of God's presence, guiding and protecting them on this journey, helping them making it through an impassable impasse, getting them through a time in which they didn't think they could ever get through. And when things seem impossible and all is lost, doesn't any assistance feel like a miracle?
This is from Exodus 14, verses 19 to 31. The messenger of God that was going before the Israelite army moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved from in front of them and took its place behind them. It came between the army of Egypt and the army of Israel. And so the cloud was there with the darkness, and it lit up the night. One did not come near the other all night. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. Adonai drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night, and turned the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. The Israelites went into the sea on dry ground, the waters forming a wall for them on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued and went into the sea after them, all of Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and chariot drivers. At the morning watch, Adonai, in the pillar of fire and cloud, looked down upon the Egyptian army and threw the Egyptian army into panic. Their chariot wheels got clogged so that they turned with difficulty. the Egyptians said, "Let us flee from the Israelites, for God is fighting for them against Egypt." Then Adonai said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots and chariot drivers." So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at dawn the sea returned to its normal depth. As the Egyptians fled before it, God tossed the Egyptians into the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the chariot drivers, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea. Not one of them remained. But the Israelites walked on dry ground through the sea, the waters forming a wall for them on their right and on their left. Thus, Adonai saved Israel that day from the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Israel saw the great work that God did against the Egyptians. So the people revered Adonai and trusted in God and in Moses, God's servant. Thus endeth the reading.
Let's join together in sing hymn number 730 in the hymnal, O Day of God, Draw Nigh. Our reading for today feels a little out of place to me. It comes from the book of Exodus, and it is commemorated every year in the Passover festival that is celebrated in the spring. And right now, our Jewish brothers and sisters are in their annual Days of Awe. Last Friday evening was Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. 1 week from today will be Yom Kippur. So the Exodus story feels to me a little bit out of sync with the Jewish liturgical cycle right now. But perhaps not, because in every Shabbat service, there is a reference to the Exodus from Egypt and the victorious escape of the Israelites from the Egyptians at the Sea of Reeds. And in every service, a joyful song is sung called Michamoka that celebrates the faithfulness of Adonai in liberating Israel. So perhaps this is a reading that is always appropriate. This past week's Tuesday meditation service featured a poem about the Exodus. It's a long poem. This service will be repeated in the next 2 Tuesdays in September. The poem about the Exodus is dense. I find it packed with meaning, and that it rewards repeated listenings. And today, I'm going to read this poem and unpack it in sections, just like Abraham and Sarah will journey in stages. The poet is Muriel Rukeyser, born in 1913, died in 1980. Another American poet, Adrienne Rich, wrote about Rukeyser. Muriel Rukeyser's poetry is unequaled in the 20th century United States in its range of reference, its generosity of vision, and its energy. She pushes us readers, writers, and participants in the life of our time to enlarge our sense of what poetry is about in the world and of the place of feelings and memory in politics, end quote. Rabbi Arthur Waskow said that Rukeyser's poem Akiba, which we will hear a portion of this morning, is, quote, one of the great poems of the 20th century, surely the greatest American Jewish poem. I encourage that it be read during Passover, and I hope it will increasingly be understood as a sacred text rooted in Jewish tradition, but reaching far beyond it to the whole of humanity, which indeed it celebrates, end quote. Now, for those of you who don't know or don't remember, Akiba was a 2nd century rabbi and leader, was involved in the Bar Kokhba revolt against Rome in the 2nd century. He became a revered martyr in Judaism after he was tortured, executed, and killed by Rome. And Rukeyser's poem makes reference to an escape before Akiba was martyred, in which his followers dress him up to look like a corpse and then carry him out of Jerusalem during the night. Now, this poem, Akiba, has 4 sections, and we're going to hear just the first section. Each of these 4 sections has its own title. And this first section of the poem Akiba is titled, The Way Out. The form of this poem creates sections within the way out by using a 1-sentence line which is separate from the main stanza it precedes and the one it follows. And this one-sentence line always uses a musical metaphor to make a connection of what is being talked about in the stanzas before and after it, and a way of separating them and providing some structure. I just can't talk about the Exodus without reminding us all that in Hebrew, the word Exodus literally means, the word Egypt literally means the narrow place or the narrow places. So in Jewish tradition, leaving Egypt is leaving a narrow place. Here is the first stanza of The Way Out. The night is covered with signs, the body and face of humankind with signs, and our journeys. Where the rock is split and speaks to the water, the flame speaks to the cloud. The red splatter, abstraction, on the door speaks to the angel and the constellations. The grains of sand on the seafloor speak at last to the noon. And the loud hammering of the land behind speaks, ringing up the bones of our thighs, the hoofs. We hear the hoofs over the seethe of the sea. All night, the centuries have heard music of passage. The night is covered with signs. Signs are a way of representing something spiritual with something tangible and concrete in our everyday experience. And Ruckhiser recognizes many signs in this story and in this poem. She refers to some that perhaps are familiar with us. The rock being split and water coming out of it, which will happen later in the book of Exodus, with Moses giving water to the thirsty Israelites in the desert. The flame speaking to the cloud in our story today. The red splatter, which is the blood from the lamb to protect the firstborn of Israel during the final plague in which the firstborn of every family was killed. Even that splatter of blood speaks to the angel and to the stars. The grains of sand, which are on the sea floor, speak to the noon when they have dried up as Israel crosses the Sea of Reeds. And then there is this reference to the loud hammering of the land behind. And the people who were doing that hammering were the Israelite slaves. And this is a remembrance of the exploitation and the oppression of slavery in Egypt, and how that is still being carried with them on their journey out of Egypt. I hope we know by now that people who have experienced deep trauma carry it. It doesn't just go away. It is healed, if it is healed, in stages, in small steps of healing, not all at once. And a people who have experienced generations of trauma, it's even deeper in the bones and the flesh. And Ruckhiser is calling us to pay attention to all these signs. And that these signs have something to tell us on this journey and this music of passage. The poem continues. Music of one child carried into the desert, firstborn, forbidden by law of the pyramid, drawn through the water, with the water-drawn people, led by the water-drawn man to the smoke mountain, the voice of the world speaking, the world covered by signs, the burning, the loving, the speaking, the opening. Strong throat of sound from the smoke mountain, still flame, the spoken singing of a young child. The meaning beginning to move, which is the song. Music of those who have walked out of slavery. So many signs in the story she is referencing. Music of one child, Moses, carried into the desert, the firstborn male of his family that was supposed to be killed by the midwives, but wasn't. And how Moses as a child was drawn through the water, placed in the river amongst the reeds found by Pharaoh's daughter. And how the Israelites will become a water-drawn people led by a water-drawn man to this smoke mountain, Sinai. And this reference, the world covered by signs, the burning, could be the flame, the pillar of fire, could be the burning bush earlier in Moses' story. The loving, which I see as a sign of God. This saga really gets going when God calls Moses out of the burning bush. And it is God's loving nature that has been displayed by God's listening to the cries of the slaves in Egypt and deciding to do something about it and to call Moses to lead the people out of slavery into freedom. And this sound from the smoking mountain, described by Ruckhiser as a strong throat of sound. What a wonderful description of their experience at Mount Sinai. And this stanza ends with this phrase that meaning is beginning to move. And that this movement of meaning is maybe made possible because it's musical. It is song. The music of those who have walked out of slavery. The next stanza. Into that journey where all things speak to all things, refusing to accept the curse and taking for signs the signs of all things, the world, the body which is part of the soul and speaks to the world, all creation being created in one image, creation. This is not the past walking into the future. The walk is painful into the present. The dance not visible as dance until much later. These dancers are discoverers of God. We knew we had all crossed over when we heard the song. Ruckhiser, throughout this poem, is working on this, alternate way of looking at reality, where everything speaks to everything, and that all creation is created in one image, and that image is creation. This is a universal message, that when we are made in the image of God, it is not as human beings, but as a part of the whole of creation. All creation created in one image, creation. We are a part of that. And she reminds us that this isn't the past walking into the future. And she's talking about a story that has become a ritual, that has become a yearly festival, that is about remembrance of the past. And she's saying that this is not the past walking into the future. What this really is about is walking into the present. She continues her poem. Out of a life of building lack on lack, the slaves refusing slavery, escaping into faith, an army who came to the ocean, the walkers who walked through the opposites, from I to opened thou, city and cleave of the sea, those at flaming Nauvoo, the ice on the great river, the escaping Negroes, swamp and wild city, the shivering children of Paris and the glass black hearses, those on the long march, all those who together are the frontier, the forehead of humanity, where the wilderness enters the world, the song of the world. Some of those references may be a little obscure to us. Nauvoo was a town in Illinois where the early Mormon community settled until 1844, suffering violence at the hands of mobs, forced to move and eventually resettle in Salt Lake City. The Long March was the trek of the early Chinese Communist Party all across China to build a political base in the Yan'an Peninsula province. The Shivering Children of Paris is probably about the creation of a workers' commune in Paris in 1870, which governed itself by direct socialist democracy until it was brutally destroyed by the invading Prussian army. And of course, the reference to the slavery of African Americans for centuries in our country as well. It's a reminder that the signs she is talking about in this sacred story, to which we need to pay attention, also relate to signs in our world today to which we need to be paying attention. Don't we have signs of what we have done to our planet? Don't we have signs of what happens when some people try to destroy democracy in a search for power? Don't we see signs in our world today when the wealthy and the powerful prosper outrageously and refuse to share with the workers who have made the business strong? and the need for unions today to right some of that inequity. There are signs all around us. Ruckesser continues. Akiba rescued secretly in the clothes of death by his disciples, carried from Jerusalem in blackness, journeying to find his journey to whatever he was loving with his life. The wilderness journey through which we move under the whirlwind truth into the new, the only accurate. A cluster of lights at night, faces before the pillar of fire. A child watching while the sea breaks open. This night, the way in. Barbarian music, a new song. It's a really important reference to Akiba here. When Akiba was finally caught by Rome and tortured and eventually executed, just before he dies, his executioner looks at him and says, "How can you be so calm and peaceful in the midst of this torture?" And Akiba replies, "All my life, I have loved God with all my soul and with all my strength. And now I finally get to love God with my whole life." That was, according to legend, how Akiba saw his martyrdom, as loving God, not because God required it, but because that's what the Roman Empire did. And I don't know how poets come up with these beautiful phrases, but Ruckeiser references that when she says about Akiba's journey, journeying to find his journey to whatever he was loving with his life. I just think it's a beautiful sign. The final stanza of the poem. Acknowledging opened water, possibility. Open like a woman to this meaning. In a time of building statues of the stars, valuing certain partial ferocious skills, while past us the chill and immense wilderness spreads its one-color wings until we know rock, water, flame, cloud, or the floor of the sea, the world is a sign, a way of speaking. To find. What shall we find? Energies, rhythms, journey, ways to discover the song of the way in. So this story about the way out is also a story about the way in. And in this journey, with its signs and with its music, we find new energy, rhythms, and the journey, which I think she is saying will always be in process.
On each of our journeys, may we give with gratitude in our hearts as is a blessing from above. It's endless love that we breathe. It's endless love that we receive. What has freely come, we now let freely go. Please join me in blessing the gifts. God, generous giver of all gifts, bless our offerings this day. Bless us too with your gift of compassion, so that we may be a blessing to each other and to the world. Amen.
Please be seated. At this point in the service, I invite us all into a time for sharing our joys and our concerns with the community. If there's anything you'd like to share, please get my attention. I'll bring the mic to you. And if there's any way in which we might join you in solidarity, please let us know by concluding with a phrase that we can repeat after you, like, thanks be to God, God hear our prayers, or blessed be, or whatever. Is there anything folks have to share this morning? All right, we're hungry for refreshments, I guess. Let's join together for a brief moment of silent prayer. After a little bit of time has gone by, I'll invite us all to join together in saying this new version of the prayer of Jesus that we have printed in the bulletin. Let us join together in silent prayer. Spirit of life that journeys with us through our own wilderness wanderings, guiding us, protecting us, encouraging us to pay attention to the signs in life all around us, signs that reveal our inextricable interconnectedness with everything that is. Signs that reveal the presence of a divine force for love and justice, always leading us out of the narrow places and into the deeper places of joy and healing and hope. Hear us now as we say together this ancient prayer that our brother Jesus taught us to pray, saying, Great Spirit, loving parent and source of all, in you we find heaven and holiness and hope for our world's renewal. May we today have food to eat, forgiveness to share, and justice for all creation. May we have strength in times of trial and oppression, loss and sadness. For it is in loving that we most fully know you and your power and your glory forever. Amen. Just a few announcements that I have. They're on the bulletin. 7 p.m., or actually any time you want this week. On Tuesday afternoon, a link will go out to a pre-recorded meditation service, and you can access it whenever you wish. And the readings, the poetry in this service are the Exodus reading you heard this morning and the Muriel Rukeyser poem. And I think it's worth many listens to. On Wednesday at 7 p.m., the Board of Trustees is meeting via Zoom. And on Thursday at 1:30 p.m., our book group is meeting to discuss 4 more poems in the book Poetry Unbound by Padre Gotuma. Are there any announcements anyone else has? Anything I'm forgetting? That's a definite, but I guess you're forgetting it too, so we'll go on. I invite you all who are able to stand and join in singing our closing hymn, number 519, in the hymnal, Lift Every Voice and Sing.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith of the dark that has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears hath been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the night, keep us forever in the path we pray, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee. Lost our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever
May you go forth this day with a deep and abiding and strong tenderness within you. May you go forth this day with eyes and ears open to the signs of the Spirit all around you. May you go forth this day with open arms and open hearts, reaching out to one another, your brothers and sisters, fellow pilgrims on this journey, both the way out and the way in. Go forth this day in peace. Amen.